The Church has long been making this name appear as if it never existed. It was removed from chronicles, portraits were destroyed, statues were shattered, but you cannot erase the past, because as long as some secrets have a grave, there will always be a visitor. Today I will tell you a story that has remained far from the surface of history, how a woman by acting like a man came to sit on the most powerful throne in all of Christendom, and rest assured no one noticed, or when they found out, it was too late. In the middle of the 9th century, in the narrow streets of Rome, shrouded in mist and dust, a name had begun to be whispered. Johannes Anglicus. It was said that he carried English blood, and this monk, with remarkably strong theological knowledge, was met with wonder by everyone. No one could defeat him in debates. The scholar could read religious texts in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. This name, heard throughout the streets of the Vatican, over time ascended to the most coveted seat of the era, the papal throne. But that night, among the thousands of candles lit at the coronation ceremony, no one knew the truth. The person on the throne was not a man, and this secret would turn into the greatest scandal in history. Now pause for a moment and think. In medieval times, when the Church's word was sharper than a sword, when women were afraid to even speak, let alone hold high positions, how did a woman manage to seize the top? The answer to this question will show you not only the story of Pope Joan, but also how fragile the medieval Church truly was. But first, let us go back to the beginning, because what we have before us is not the story of an easy rise. It is a story of tremendous life struggle and intellect. According to legend, Joan was born at the beginning of the 9th century near Mainz, to an English missionary who had emigrated from England and a German mother. Her father was a Christian missionary, and rather than educating his daughter, he did not see her as open to development because she was not male. Despite this, even at that young age, Joan's love of knowledge was remarkable. It is recounted that from an early age she showed great interest in Latin texts, religious sermons, and theological debates. However, the rules of the era were clear. Education, the church, and power belonged to men. Women could only attain a limited ability to read and write, found only within convents. Joan did not find these rules right. According to the legend, Joan met a young priest named Ethelstan. This priest greatly admired Joan's capacity for learning and began to educate her. A teacher-student relationship was formed between the two. However, before long, this relationship turned into a deeper bond. Ethelstan wanted to enroll Joan in the well-known academies in Athens, but education demanded a price. Joan put on men's clothing, cut her hair, and took on a new identity. Johannes Anglicus was born, and this identity, empowered by time, would make Johannes deeply influential upon the world. In Athens, Joan, or in her transformed form Johannes, studied philosophy, rhetoric, and theology. She debated with the great minds of the era who carried knowledge. Her teacher saw her as a remarkably intelligent student, but one day Ethelstan died. In some versions of the legend from illness, in others from an accident. Joan was left completely alone in Athens with a woman's heart but a male identity, with only what she had accumulated in her mind. There was no going back from this, because what she had done was enough at that time to dig her own grave. So what did Joan do? She did not give up. On the contrary, she ran forward. When she arrived in Rome, the name Johannes Anglicus was already being spoken of by people. References from the Athenian academies had paved the way for this name. In Rome, she initially gave lectures, then served as a church advisor, and gradually climbed the ladder step by step. At the end of this ascent, which lasted years, around the year 853, Johannes Anglicus was elected pope. It is said that this election took place by unanimous vote of the cardinals, because everyone admired Johannes's abilities, intelligence, and problem-solving skills. No one knew that the person they believed to be a man was actually a woman. But you cannot keep secrets forever. Now I want to ask you a question, and I expect you to answer it in the comments section. If you were in Joan's place, what would you have done? Would you have revealed your identity, or would you have continued carrying such a great secret, or would you never have gotten involved in such a thing from the very beginning? And if you find this story interesting, subscribe right now, because every week on this channel we journey into the depths of history and its least known corners. With just one click, you can become part of this journey. Some accounts say Pope Joan sat on the throne for 2 years, others say up to 4 years. Throughout this time, she played an active role in decisions made within the church. She wrote letters, led meetings, but as time passed, the changes in her body could no longer be concealed. According to legend, Joan had become pregnant, and shortly before the birth was to take place, Joan was walking from the Lateran Palace toward the Basilica of St. Peter. That day, there was a large crowd on the stone-paved streets of Rome. People had flocked to the streets to see the Pope. Whether she stumbled or whether labor pains began is not known, but at that moment, in front of everyone, Pope Joan gave birth, in the streets, in the middle of a religious procession, and the secret had been revealed. Just imagine how a system built stitch by stitch was shaken to its roots by a single birth. Everyone present was stunned by this situation. The crowd first fell silent, then erupted into chaos. A woman had become pope. A woman had governed the holiest office of the Christian world. This was not merely a scandal, it had shattered the very structure of the era, the entire understanding of legitimacy. The accounts of what followed vary. Some sources write that the crowd turned on Joan in fury and lynched her. Some recount that Joan and her child were immediately cut off from life. In some versions, Joan and her baby were imprisoned and later died there. But the common thread across all these versions is this: Joan's story was systematically attempted to be erased by the church after that day, and this very attempt at erasure forms perhaps the most fascinating part of the story. Why did the church work so hard? Why, over centuries, did it go to such lengths to remove this name from chronicles, to tear down monuments, to burn portraits? The answer is actually quite simple: because the existence of Pope Joan fundamentally shook everything the church claimed. Divine guidance, the sanctified election process, the inviolability of male hierarchy. If a woman could so easily rise to the top of the church, then what was all of this system? Where was the legitimacy of this power structure? These questions were impossible for the church to answer. Therefore, there was only one option: denial. However, denial was not so easy, because throughout the Middle Ages there were countless records concerning Pope Joan. In the 13th century, Dominican friar Martin of Troppau explicitly mentioned Pope Joan in his work titled Chronicon Pontificum et Imperatorum. This work was one of the most widely copied historical sources of its era, and hundreds of copies were found in monasteries across Europe. Not just this work, dozens of other medieval chronicles also mention Joan's name. In fact, Joan's name appeared on the list of popes in the Vatican for many years, and this list was only altered in the 16th or 17th century. There is another detail that is even more interesting: a tradition practiced in the Vatican for centuries. Before the coronation ceremony, each newly elected pope was seated on a special stone chair, and a cardinal would verify the gender of the seated person by hand. This tradition also appears in Byzantine-era sources. Why was such a ritual deemed necessary? The Church never officially explained the origin of this ritual, but the majority of historians argue that this ritual was developed as a direct response to the story of Pope Joan. In other words, while denying Joan's existence, the Church simultaneously took precautions to ensure such a thing would never happen again. This contradiction all by itself tells everything that needs to be told. Now, another question for you. Do you think the Church's undertaking of such a comprehensive cover-up indicates that Pope Joan truly existed? Or conversely, does such a persistent denial prove how powerful the legend became? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because this debate continues among historians even today. By the 15th century, one of the most important figures in papal history, Enea Silvio Piccolomini, the person who would later become Pope Pius II, authored a text acknowledging the reality of Pope Joan. But he soon changed his view. Why? It is not entirely known. Whether political pressure, the internal dynamics of the Church, or some other reason was influential remains unclear to this day. During the Reformation era, the story of Pope Joan took on a different function. Protestant reformers, led by Martin Luther, used this story as evidence of the corruption and unreliability of the Catholic Church. No matter how much the Church denied it, the opposing side wanted to spread this story as powerfully as possible, and thus Pope Joan became, over the centuries, both a religious and a political weapon. So how does modern history look upon this story? Academic studies of the 19th and 20th centuries have largely reached the conclusion that Pope Joan was not a historical reality, but rather a powerful legend produced by medieval society. Johannes Döllinger, the German academic who conducted the most comprehensive research on this subject, and the researchers who followed him, argued that the gaps and chronological inconsistencies in the 9th century papal lists made it impossible for Joan to have been a real pope. According to this view, during the period when Joan is claimed to have served as pope, the papal seat was already occupied by other names, and no gap was present in the records. However, there are those who question this academic consensus as well. Some historians argue that given the chaotic record-keeping practices of the Middle Ages, the Church's systematic attempts at falsification, and the political turmoil of the era, the completeness of the records cannot alone serve as sufficient evidence. Because history is not made up solely of what was written on paper, sometimes the most powerful evidence is hidden in what was erased and what was silenced. Let us also consider this. Can the survival of Joan's story across such a wide geography, in so many different cultures, and over such a long span of time be explained solely by the power of a legend to spread? Chronicles written in different languages across the four corners of Europe, narrators unaware of one another, containing differing details yet conveying fundamentally the same story. Is this a coincidence, or is it history's way of bringing a truth buried far deeper to the surface? Perhaps the most correct question should be framed this way: is Pope Joan a real historical figure, or does this story reflect the collective inner voice of medieval people regarding the power of women? Perhaps Joan never lived, but perhaps Joan's story represents the voices of hundreds, thousands of women who lived, but whose names were never mentioned, the collective voice of all women who were forced to hide their knowledge, forced to conceal their identities, who could only find a place on the margins of history. And this does not make the story any less real. On the contrary, it perhaps makes it all the more significant. Today, Joan's name continues to live on in novels, theatrical plays, films, and academic articles. The novel Pope Joan, written by Donna Woolfolk Cross in 1972 and reaching millions in sales, brought this story back onto the world agenda. In 2009, a German-produced feature film brought Joan's life to the silver screen. With the rise of the feminist movement, Joan's story was reinterpreted as a symbolic narrative of women's exclusion from structures of power. And the Vatican? The Vatican never changed its official stance. Pope Joan is officially a name that does not exist in papal history. Joan has no place in the Church's official lists. But this name continues to live far beyond the walls of the Vatican. So what do you think? Is Pope Joan a myth, a suppressed truth of history, or one of those rare stories where myth and reality intertwine? Answer this question in the comments. Every perspective is valuable, because history is not just the domain of academics, it is the shared concern of everyone who is curious. And let me also remind you, if you want to follow such stories regularly, subscribe to our channel right now and keep the notification bell on. Every week we explore the deepest and least known corners of history together. With just one click, you can become part of this community. Finally, let us say this: whether real or legend, the story of Pope Joan reminds us of something very important. Power is never as solid as it is claimed to be. Legitimacy is never as clean as it is claimed to be. And history is never as accurate as it is written. The Church tried to erase Joan, but Joan outlasted even that attempt. Some secrets truly never die, and some stories, no matter how deeply they are buried, one day resurface. Just like this story. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and hit like. See you in another video. Goodbye.